5 years ago, in order to care for Bai Ningbing's purportedly severe and debilitating hand nerve condition, I did not hesitate for a single second to sacrifice my skyrocketing pottery and ceramics career right at its absolute peak. Even though every elite artisan in the industry expressed profound regret, claiming I was letting a disabled woman, who couldn't even handle a basic piece of raw clay, completely obliterate my future, I still fiercely brushed aside my family's intense objections, just to make her my wife. 5 years later, a catastrophic gas explosion ripped through the factory's old kiln room. Amidst the raging, towering inferno, I recklessly charged straight into the sea of flames to rescue Bai Ningbing, yet solely to protect the prized Celadon vase, crafted in the signature distinct artistic style of her beloved childhood white moonlight. She ruthlessly shoved me into a collapsing heap of blazing debris, leaving me to burn alive. As long as you fake this hand nerve injury and pretend that you can't even hold a pair of chopsticks steadily, that hopelessly lovesick fool, Fang Yuan, will definitely pity you for the rest of his life. He will willingly act as your literal puppet, slaving away to fire and craft every single masterpiece for you. Understood. I'll do exactly as you say, darling. This hidden audio recording had been meticulously concealed by Ningbing deep inside an encrypted cloud folder. It was an intimate domestic playback that instantly triggered my tears of blinding rage, plunging me into a bottomless, freezing abyss. It turns out that from the absolute beginning to the bitter end, the deep salvation and mutual sincerity I genuinely believed we shared was nothing more than a toxic, calculated theatrical performance, meticulously orchestrated by the two of them. I glared at the deceptive woman standing right before my eyes, observing her deliberately trembling hands. The pathetic fool who was about to take absolute liability for the entire arson case upon herself, solely to shield that worthless bastard lover of hers, was none other than Bai Ningbing. My wounded heart ached with a violent, agonizing pain, as if it were being relentlessly hacked by a jagged blade. But on the exact day I finally resolved to walk away from Bai Ningbing forever, my phone suddenly flashed with an incoming call, and a raspy, desperate voice echoed through the speaker. Fang Yuan, please don't abandon me. My hands can still be fully cured. I swear, you are the only person I have left. In this entire world, I had suffered extensive, full-body burns coupled with fractured ribs on my right side, rotting away in a standard hospital ward, right outside the intensive care unit for 7 excruciating, agonizing days. Throughout these entire 7 days, Bai Ningbing did not deign to visit me, even a single time. I stared blankly at the vase, completely hollow inside. Celadon vase sitting on my bedside table, the precise object she had risked her literal life to protect, staring at the familiar, crazing patterns etched across its surface. I felt an overwhelming wave of nausea, finding that even my shallowest breaths tasted heavily of thick, metallic blood. No one on earth understood this specific artistic style better than me, because years ago at the International Ceramics Competition, I had gone head-to-head with that very same bastard in a ruthless, legendary showdown, ultimately liberating Bai Ningbing from his web of pretentious lies and winning her over to my side. The exact second I averted my gaze, the heavy door of my hospital room was violently flung open. Bai Ningbing burst inside, completely frantic. She entirely ignored my broken, gauze-wrapped body, her sapphire-like eyes instantly locking onto the Celadon vase resting on the bedside cabinet. Her tightly furrowed brows practically radiating an intense interrogation. Fang Yuan, why on earth did you order someone to deliver that specific vase straight to the hospital? Do you have any idea how much I had frantically dug through that toxic, smoking rubble just to locate it? Bai Ningbing was gasping heavily for breath. Those precise hands of hers, which were supposedly so severely damaged that holding a simple glass of water would trigger uncontrollable, violent tremors, were suddenly moving with fluid, lightning-fast agility as she lunged straight toward the vase, clutching it possessively against her chest as if paralyzed by the fear that I might wrench it away from her. As expected, Her presence was entirely motivated by this single piece of stoneware. If my loyal assistant, Xiao Wang, hadn't salvaged it and brought it directly to the hospital ward first, I bet she would have already cradled this perfect masterpiece and proudly marched right into the grand opening ceremony of that bastard's brand new art gallery. Why on earth would she ever remember to visit her half-dead husband, who was rotting away in a hospital bed? The attending nurse, entering the room to swap my dressings, gasped out loud in sheer horror. At the scene, I stared at her with ice-cold, dead eyes. The exact millisecond she attempted to spin around and make her escape with the vase, I abruptly lunged forward, locking my fingers onto the very base of the vessel. To my absolute horror, simply to protect that precious relic, she ruthlessly yanked my entire mangled body right off the mattress. Hey, what on earth do you think you're doing? His fractured ribs were just reset. He cannot handle any physical stress. The nurse's frantic screams echoed violently across the sterile walls of the ward. I stared directly into Bai Ningbing's tear-streaked, bloodshot eyes as she continued to fiercely wrestle the vase away from me. Finally, a mocking, self-deprecating smile curled upon my lips as I completely let go of my grip. The sudden release of force caused her to stumble backward, nearly crashing into the opposite wall. My lips into a hollow, agonizing smirk as I completely let go. She had successfully shielded her precious vase while the violent momentum sent me crashing straight off the hospital bed and onto the unforgiving, ice-cold linoleum floor. My fractured ribs flared with a blinding, soul-shredding agony, but this brutal, physical torment, ironically, slightly alleviated the crushing, suffocating weight suffocating my chest. Clutching the Celadon vase, Bai Ningbing froze dead in her tracks, staring down at me, as cold sweat drenched my entire body on the floor. For the absolute first time, a flash of sheer, untelegraphed panic flickered across her eyes. It was as if she suddenly realized the horrific weight of her actions. She frantically set the vase down, extending her allegedly trembling hands in a desperate attempt to hoist me up, but I convulsed my body away in pure, unadulterated disgust to avoid her touch. Her hands froze mid-air, completely paralyzed, before she was forced to awkwardly retract them. The medical team came rushing in upon hearing the commotion, fiercely berating Bai Ningbing for showing absolute disregard for a critical patient's survival, seeing her keep her head buried low, putting on that pathetic, disabled persona of a fragile, helpless victim who couldn't even care for herself. She looked incredibly pitiful. The doctor sighed, entirely helpless to do anything more. Fang Yuan, can you please stop throwing a childish tantrum? Let's just consider the entire ceramic factory incident as ancient history, okay? I swear. To you, the absolute second I finish firing the specific piece, I will personally craft a custom mug just for you. Her eyes brimmed with tears as her voice cracked with emotion. Get the hell out. Before she could even finish staging her pathetic, aggrieved performance, I blindly snatched a stainless steel tumbler from the bedside table and violently hurled it straight at her feet. Warm water exploded everywhere, drenching her clothes. Hearing her spew these endless, calculated lies right now only triggered a wave of absolute, stomach-churning revulsion deep within my soul. Bai Ningbing, don't you find your own actions utterly sickening? As the atmosphere in the sterile ward plummeted to absolute zero, that exact bastard, rocking a high-end, pristine white suit, materialized at the doorway like a triumphant conqueror. He glared smugly at the Celadon vase tucked safely inside Bai Ningbing's protective embrace, before instantly plastering a heavily exaggerated, feigned look of shock across his face, acting as though he had, just this second, realized I was even there, sprawled out on the floor. Oh my, well if it isn't the once legendary prodigy, Fang Yuan, who used to rule our ceramics world? Wow, after all these years apart, how on earth did you let yourself degenerate into this pathetic, half-dead corpse? With third-degree burns this horrific, I highly doubt you'll ever play with mud ever again. From the hallway outside, the chaotic clatter of approaching footsteps grew louder and louder. It turns out, it was a flock of our former professional colleagues. They were clearly on their way to attend the grand opening of that bastard's new gallery, and stumbling upon my utterly mangled, pathetic state, their eyes widened with absolute shock and mock pity. This was clearly a calculated ambush. He intentionally brought a crowd to witness my public humiliation. Man, putting everything else aside, Fong Yuan is truly pathetic. He threw away his entire life for a woman, with ruined hands, willingly slaving away as her ghostcrafter in the shadows, only for her to completely treat him like absolute garbage. Hearing those toxic whispers filtering through the open doorway, every single piece of the puzzle finally clicked. I raised my eyes and locked them onto Bai Ningbing, whose face had gone completely pale. She was currently utilizing those supposedly paralyzed, disabled hands to steadily and securely pass that flawless celadone vase directly to that worthless bastard. The sheer desperation to please him radiating from her gaze exposed every single layer of their deception. Every single bit of it was a fabricated lie from start to finish. The bastard snatched the masterpiece, mockingly tossing it in the air, as his lips continuously spewed venomous, degrading insults at me. Every single syllable, every single word was a public declaration that I was nothing but a broken, washed-up loser, a failure who couldn't even keep his own wife, let alone control the temperature of his own kiln. Get the hell out of my room, all of you, I snapped, my eyes shut, refusing to spare another microsecond of attention on that sickening duo who turned my stomach. I slammed my hand down on the emergency call button, summoning the hospital security detail to forcefully eject the entire circus. I was completely done letting this toxic, adulterous pair play me for a fool like some circus animal. Late that exact night, as I lay in a semi-conscious, agonizing daze against the pillows, my smartphone suddenly vibrated violently. An old classmate, whom I hadn't spoken to in literal years, now a world-renowned, elite art curator, Lin Chu, abruptly sent a high-priority audio file to my device. The second I hit play, the low, mocking laughter of that toxic duo echoed through the speaker, accompanied by a shocking, detailed revelation. The raw playback completely tore the final veil off their sinister plot of that worthless bastard, layered over that sweet, submissive, and deeply fragile tone that I was once so incredibly infatuated with, belonging to none other than Bai Ningbing. Ningbing, as long as you make him completely willing to stay enslaved by your side, executing every single masterpiece in your place, then I will gladly accept you right back into my arms. After all, you and I grew up together from early childhood, and that idiot is so hopelessly obsessed with you. Can you just do this one favor for me? It's not like you're losing anything out of this deal. Fong Yuan possesses an insatiable hunger to win, so he will absolutely worship the ground you walk on, acting as your submissive puppet for the rest of his life. All right, darling, I promise you. The silence in the ward became deafeningly terrifying, punctuated only by the shallow, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. My soul turned utterly freezing cold, freezing. Far worse than the exact millisecond Bai Ningbing ruthlessly shoved me into the blazing inferno. Unconsciously, I didn't even realize. Uncontrollable tears were streaming down my face. For 5 whole years, solely because of a single command from that bastard. This woman had the sheer audacity to fake being disabled for half a decade. I couldn't bear to watch her shed tears whenever she pretended she couldn't even touch raw clay, so I passionately took hold of her hands, day after day, year after year, standing by the pottery wheel, to manifest every single artistic creation for her. I single-handedly elevated her to the prestigious status of a gorgeous, resilient ceramic artisan who conquered her physical disability. It turns out that from the absolute beginning, the way she blushed and claimed she wanted to build a beautiful life with me was nothing more than savage, cold-blooded deception. The day I was officially discharged, I returned to the apartment and stared at the massive wedding portrait commanding the living room wall. In the frame, she leaned into my chest, sporting a smile so blindingly radiant and pure. I let out a mocking dead laugh, snatched the heavy glass ashtray from the coffee table, and violently hurled it straight into the center of the frame. The sound of glass shattering into a million pieces inside the empty apartment echoed. Viciously, Bai Ningbing pushed the front door open, and witnessing this destructive scene, her face was completely drained of color. Yet, she incredibly fast regained her composure, masking her expression with an ice-cold glare, acting as if I were merely throwing a childish tantrum due to psychological trauma from the fire. She assumed that as long as she put on her classic, aggrieved victim routine, I would immediately back down as always, drowning in absolute guilt and desperately run to coddle her. But I simply sat in absolute silence amidst Her face was completely drained of any color, yet she incredibly quickly regained her icy, calculated composure, hardening her expression to act as if I was merely suffering an erratic emotional meltdown after the trauma of the fire, believing that as long as she put on a deeply aggrieved, victimized act, I would immediately revert to my pathetic old self, overflowing with dynamic guilt and frantically rushing to coddle and comfort her. Instead, I just remained dead silent, sitting in the middle of shattered, chaotic wreckage, staring at her with dead, ice-cold eyes. What happened today at the clinic was genuinely a massive misunderstanding. I truly, deeply wanted to check on you. Are your burn injuries still hurting badly? She apparently could no longer keep up her psychological composure. Her eyes turned completely bloodshot and heavy. Tears cascaded down her cheeks. She extended both hands, attempting, as she always did in the past, to let them tremble delicately as she reached out to touch my face. Your hands aren't shaking anymore, are they? So drop the pathetic paralysis routine in front of my face. It literally makes me want to vomit. I finally spoke, my voice totally devoid of human emotion. Bai Ningbing's entire expression instantly froze solid on her pale face. Her physical frame, which had been leaning intimately toward me, abruptly locked up, right where she stood, as if a violent bolt of lightning had just detonated right next to her ears. For 5 long years, I had always treated her like a piece of priceless, fragile porcelain, fiercely protecting and pampering her in the palm of my hand. Even during my absolute angriest moments, I had never once weaponized her physical disability or thrown it in her face to inflict pain, let alone spat such venomous, toxic sarcasm at her. This was the absolute first time, realizing that the woman I had worshipped with every fiber of my being for 5 whole years had, throughout that entire span of time, countless times joined that worthless bastard in mockingly laughing at my utter stupidity. I could feel nothing but a wave of visceral revulsion surging from the depths of my subconscious. Impure disgust, e forcefully wrenched my face away, refusing to spare her another single glance. Xiao Wang, go ahead and prepare the new studio space over in the Southern District. Every single bit of drama connected to Bai Ningbing. I am completely washing my hands of it. Boss, you finally snapped out of it. You are finally willing to abandon that toxic narcissistic leech. My assistant, Xiao Wang, on the other end of the line, spoke with a voice that was literally vibrating with intense emotion. The second he heard me bring up the name of that subhuman animal, Xiao Wang's teeth clenched even tighter with unadulterated rage. A few days later, I stood once again before my very own pottery wheel, staring at the shelves overflowing with original blueprints, sketches, and signature glazes. Imbued with my own unique artistic style, I felt as though I had lived through multiple lifetimes. It turns out that for the past 5 years, I had been so desperately obsessed with building a flawless reputation and legacy for Bai Ningbing that I had completely forgotten who I truly was. So it turns out that for the past 5 long years, I was completely consumed with building up a flawless public persona for Bai Ningbing while having long since entirely forgotten Turn, the version of Feng Yuan who once absolutely electrified the global ceramics biennial exhibition. I had completely brainwashed myself into forgetting my own value. That animal and I actually studied under the exact same master, but we were perpetually locked in a bitter, venomous rivalry. I absolutely loathed his continuous, pretentious, high-end mighty arrogance, which he ruthlessly weaponized to crush and humiliate Bai Ningbing when she first broke into the industry. Back then, when he maliciously forced Bai Ningbing, who was allegedly suffering from severe right-hand nerve damage, to haul back-breaking, massive blocks of raw clay. I completely lost my temper. I charged forward, ripped the heavy clay from his hands, and shielded her protectively behind my back. Even after we officially tied the knot and spent 5 full years together, I had never once forgotten the utterly helpless, lost look in her eyes from that day. A gaze that seemed to brim with pure, unadulterated adoration just for me. Solely because of that look, I abandoned my own solo international exhibitions, willingly decaying into a nameless shadow, slaving behind her back. But looking back at it, today what was truly hidden deep within those deceitful eyes was never love at all. It was nothing but cold, calculated greed. Realizing this, I let out a massive, deep breath of pure, unadulterated relief, flashing a confident grin at Xiao Wang. No more running away. This time, I'm going to ruthlessly take back every single thing that belongs to me. Plunging back into high-intensity creative work was undeniably exhausting, but my artistic soul felt more completely rejuvenated and fulfilled than ever before. Honestly, if she didn't constantly loiter outside the studio building, if I didn't have to lay eyes on Bai Ningbing's face, my mental state would be 1,000 times better. Why on earth haven't you come home in so many days? The dark circles under Bai Ningbing's eyes were deeply hollowed out, her entire posture looking completely withered and drained, as if she were genuinely grieving and losing sleep. Over me, she stood there, anxious and desperate, completely blocking my path. But I didn't even bother to glance at her, treating her exactly like the ice-cold, indifferent strangers who used to spectate her dramas. I left her standing there, completely isolated and ignored, casually continuing my lively, light-hearted conversation with the raw materials supplier standing right next to me. The bystanders gathered around, all cast incredibly bizarre, judging stares at this weeping woman who was desperately clinging to my sleeve and refusing to let go. A few people even began to whisper and gossip among themselves, muttering whether she was suffering from some sort of mental breakdown or psychological instability. In the past, I couldn't bear to see, clinging onto me desperately without letting go. Honestly, some people in the crowd even began whispering and gossiping, wondering if her mental sanity had completely snapped or not. In the past, I couldn't bear to stand the thought of others gossiping about her, always being the very first to pull her protectively into my chest. But right now, I completely refused to play that pathetic clown ever again. It was utterly meaningless. When Fang Yuan and his old circle of acquaintances gathered together alongside the desperate Ningbing, a high-profile art gala just a few days afterward, that human trash didn't hesitate for a single second to swirl his wine glass and swagger over. He flashed that exact same sickening, arrogant smirk to mock me. I remember you. Turning my gaze toward Bai Ningbing, standing right next to him, she instantly panicked, her eyes widening in absolute horror, as she desperately, frantically tried to deny everything, scrambling to sever any visible connection with him. She tried to prove to me that she hadn't invited that bastard to the gala. I lightly tapped the screen of my smartphone, reviewing the encrypted text files Lin Chu had just sent over, exposing that worthless degenerate, irrefutable, ironclad evidence, revealing that his entire portfolio was highly suspected of shameless plagiarism and using ghost artists for years. My soul felt completely dead and frozen. Yet my facial expression remained entirely unbothered as I looked at the two clowns before me. Hey, bastard. That wealthy heiress you were about to get engaged to. Your beautiful fiancée. She's definitely showing up tonight, right? The industry elites and opportunistic reporters instantly swarmed the area, their faces lighting up as they prepared to witness a legendary drama explode. Years ago, solely because of Bai Ningbing, he and I had constant, explosive feuds within the art community. Everyone in the industry viewed it as a running joke. Wait, wasn't Bai Ningbing secretly infatuated with that toxic bastard back then? Amidst the tight crowd, an anonymous voice blurted out an incredibly ill-timed but observant comment. The real, exquisite entertainment was finally hitting its peak. Right now, I wanted to see exactly how much longer these two could keep up their pathetic charade. I locked my eyes on Bai Ningbing and let out a cold, cynical laugh. I couldn't care less who she was obsessed with in the past. After all, I have absolutely no use for a pathological liar who had the audacity to fake her own physical disability, a literal parasite, who only knows how to weaponize and leech off the sympathy of others. Whoever wants this garbage can gladly take her off my hands. The moment those words left my lips, the massive, opulent banquet hall instantly plunged into absolute, suffocating silence. In the past, countless people secretly mocked me behind my back for staying with Bai Ningbing, branding me as a pathetic simp who threw away his potential for. In the past, countless people secretly mocked me for staying by Bai Ningbing's side, laughing behind my back that I was nothing but an over-tolerant clown running in overly charitable work or being a saint. Meanwhile, she constantly cowered behind my back to put on a pitiful facade. Right now, the tables have completely turned. Bai Ningbing stood frozen dead in her tracks, her face drained of any color, subjected to the piercing gazes of absolute shock and deep disgust radiating from everyone in the room. Completely helpless, she desperately locked her eyes onto me, but I merely turned my head to look at that worthless bastard, only to find him wearing an expression of pure revulsion, desperate to maintain his distance from her. I couldn't help but let out a chilling, mocking laugh. I recall the grand artist, Mr. Chin, professed to have a deeply profound, unbreakable affection for Bai Ningbing, didn't he? Why don't we let your lovely fiancé in on the intimate little secret you two shared back then? Let's unmask exactly how many award-winning masterpieces Bai Ningbing secretly ghost-crafted to build your entire career. The second those words echoed out, the entire banquet hall collectively held its breath. Everyone's faces twisted into a cocktail of shock and anticipation, eagerly spectating the absolute biggest drama of the year. The wealthy corporate heiress, who had maintained a pretentious, arrogant demeanor all night, instantly underwent a massive, horrified change in expression. What the hell did you just say? Chin, you and this crippled woman have been having a toxic secret affair behind my back, and those legendary masterpieces you claimed to have personally handcrafted were actually made by her. I let out a mocking, cynical sneer. Staring at his completely bloodless face, I directly pulled out my smartphone and hit play on that multi-minute audio recording, broadcasting it straight through the grand banquet hall's main audio system. Fan Yuan, what the hell do you think you're doing? Don't you dare fabricate lies to slander me. Everyone in the industry knows you've always been desperately envious of my raw talent. You willingly married a worthless cripple who can't even knead raw clay. You could never compete with me. So now you're trying to sling toxic filth at my name. That worthless bastard flew into a psychotic, red-faced fury, his veins popping, as he lunged straight toward me, desperately aiming to snatch the phone out of my grip. In the very next microsecond, just as he was about to grab me by the collar, Bai Ningbing, who had been standing there completely catatonic, suddenly exploded with a terrifying burst of raw adrenaline. She violently charged forward, brutally shoving both me and him apart. She aggressively spread her arms, acting as a human shield in front of my face, glaring daggers directly at him as she shrieked at the top of her lungs, "Don't you dare lay a finger on him. Everything was entirely caused by you were the one who blackmailed me." She shrieked until her vocal cords completely ruptured, both of her hands violently clenched into bloodless fists, leaving absolutely zero trace or illusion of her supposed muscle paralysis. The entire banquet hall erupted into absolute chaos. The collective gazes of the crowd fixated on her head, now completely warped into unadulterated, naked revulsion and pure, unmasked contempt. I ice coldly shove her trembling, blocking frame out of my path, letting out a soft, dismissive click of my tongue, refusing to grant her even a single microsecond of my attention. She spun around frantically, attempting to yank me back, but that corporate heiress had already gone completely psychotic with unbridled rage. She lunged forward, delivering a brutal, echoing slap straight across Bai Ningbing's face, sending her crashing onto the floor. I kept wondering why on earth you suddenly demanded to take over the corporate operations. Turns out you just wanted to cherry pick and secure a safety net for your toxic schemes while masquerading as some elite saint. From the dense crowd, waves of mocking, savage laughter exploded. Years ago, she parasitically used my hands to ghostcraft her masterpieces, manufacturing a pure, fragile persona solely to leech off the collective sympathy of the entire community. Right now, that deceptive veil has been completely shredded to pieces, and the overwhelming contempt radiating from the massive crowd was virtually drowning this pathetic, toxic fraud. What a joke. What kind of fragile, pure white lotus act is this supposed to be? This is seriously, utterly stomach-churning. I listened to the relentless barrage of venomous insults suffocating the room, looking down at Bai Ningbing as she sat completely paralyzed on the unforgiving floor, left with absolutely zero strength or leverage to push back the suffocating, toxic rage that had been trapped inside my chest for 5 long years finally dissolve away by a substantial margin. My sincerest apologies, everyone. It seems like I've arrived a bit late to the party. Wow, things sure are incredibly lively over here. A crystal clear, elegant female voice abruptly sliced through the chaotic atmosphere. It was none other than Lin Zhu. I looked toward her, completely unbothered by her entrance, internally thanking her for assisting me in unmasking this circus. Rocking a stunning designer cocktail dress, her piercing, intelligent eyes swept across by Ningbing with a cocktail of deep pity and freezing contempt. As an elite, powerhouse art curator who commanded the absolute top-tier, exclusive industry networks, the sudden physical arrival of Lin Chu instantly shifted the entire gravitational pull of the room. The elite guests aggressively swarmed forward, desperately trying to secure a greeting with her. Fang Yuan, please stop being angry at me. All of those horrific things were entirely in the distant past. Right now, my entire heart and soul only belong to you. And only you. I am deeply, desperately infatuated with you alone. Can you please just find it in your heart to forgive me this one final time? I beg you. Driven by total delusion, Bai Ningbing lunged forward to clamp her arms tightly around my legs, wailing hysterically with a face absolutely drenched in pathetic tears. Even up to this literal microsecond, her lips only spewed the same hollow, meaningless, and utterly garbage excuses, staring down at her groveling, miserable form as she begged for salvation. I only felt a sense of absolute, dark amusement. Forcing down the hollow void inside my chest, I subtly curled my lips into a razor-sharp smirk, the calm serenity of a man who has completely and permanently cut ties forever. Right beneath her shattered, utterly unbelieving gaze, I applied brutal, unrelenting force to peel each of her clinging fingers off my leg, one by one. Between us, everything has officially hit a dead end. Bai Ningbing, farewell. And by that, I mean I hope we never cross paths again for the rest of our natural lives. I spun on my heel, marching directly toward the grand exit. Bai Ningbing let out a blood-curdling, tragic shriek from behind my back. I was wrong. Fang Yuan, I am genuinely, deeply sorry for everything. Yet, my pace did not falter for a single millisecond, nor did I dare to cast a solitary glance over my shoulder. I strode completely out of the banquet hall. Just outside the grand entrance, Lin Chu was casually leaning against the sleek chassis of her sports car, just to spectate your exquisite little drama. I had to completely blow off a multi-million-dollar corporate meeting, you know? How exactly does my old classmate plan on compensating me? She beamed at me with a blinding, playful smirk, idly twirling the luxury car key fob around her finger. Defeated, I merely shook my head and slid into her passenger seat, abandoning every single piece of that chaotic, toxic circus behind us as I officially commenced the brand new chapter of my existence. The very next morning, I had the finalized, legally signed divorce papers delivered directly to Bai Ningbing's doorstep. Simultaneously, I broadcasted an official, high-profile industry press release. Studio Fang Yuan was completely evacuating this city, migrating its entire operation directly to the prestigious, elite art district in the capital. In the passed solely to cater to her toxic, fragile ego and preserve her so-called self-esteem. I had deliberately suppressed my own creative evolution. But now, having entirely cast off that heavy, suffocating web of calculated deception, I felt like an apex predator finally unleashed, back into its natural hunting grounds. Unsurprisingly, everything manifested exactly as I had calculated. The absolute millisecond my covert, masterful ghost-crafting support was permanently severed. The elite professional reputation of my fraudulent stand-in, Bai Ningbing, experienced a catastrophic, irreversible freefall. Her prestigious title of the resilient disabled prodigy instantly warped into the absolute biggest, most humiliating laughingstock in the entire contemporary art world. Several months later, taking advantage of a brief trip back to my old city to finalize some tedious, lingering bureaucratic paperwork, I happened to stroll through a remote, rundown wholesale ceramics market. There I suddenly caught sight of Bai Ningbing. She was dressed in a tattered, filth-stained uniform. Cheap, low-grade workers' overalls, her hands clutching a few crude, horrifically misshapen and low-quality clay pieces, as she desperately and miserably begged the owner of a tiny, insignificant retail shop to please purchase her work. Look, let me give it to you completely straight, miss Bai. If it weren't for the fact that Mr. Fong Yuan was carrying your entire career from the shadows back then, this absolute garbage you're holding wouldn't even be accepted by us if you offered it for free. Your actual skill level is so pathetic that even a raw, first-week apprentice could outperform you, yet you still have the absolute audacity to act like some elite master. Get the hell out of here now. The shopkeeper, showing zero mercy, brutally shoved her away. Bai Ningbing stumbled back wildly, causing the atrocious ceramic vessels in her arms to crash violently onto the concrete floor, shattering into a million worthless shards. She stared blankly and catatonically down at the ruins resting at her feet, her gaze completely overflowing with unadulterated shock and absolute, bottomless despair. Oh my God, Master Fong Yuan, what an absolute honor. What brings a legendary figure like you to our tiny, humble district today? The exact second the shopkeeper raised his eyes and recognized me, his posture instantly morphed into a sickeningly sycophantic, fawning grin, and he practically sprinted out of his store to greet me. The sharp, curious gazes of the surrounding merchants and shoppers instantly swarmed toward my position, whereas when they looked at Bai Ningbing, they aggressively backed away as if she were a literal plague. Bai Ningbing abruptly whipped her head around, and the exact millisecond her eyes locked onto me, a manic, desperate light exploded within her gaze, completely ignoring the razor-sharp porcelain shards littering the asphalt. She stumbled and staggered as she sprinted toward me. Her fragile hands, caked in filth and raw clay, had been deeply sliced by the debris, leaving blood dripping down her fingers. Fong Yuan, look, I completely destroyed every single piece I ever crafted for that worthless bastard. Right now I am only firing pottery exclusively for you and you alone. Look, please. This is the exact signature design you used to love the most in the past. She tremblingly extended a half-baked, utterly hideous and misshapen lump of raw clay toward my face. Years ago, I had desperately yearned for her to handcraft something just for me, even if it were a simple, ordinary coffee mug. But witnessing this pathetic, aggressively delayed offering today, I only felt a sense of dark, mocking amusement. Bai Ningbing, you worthless bitch. How dare you ghost my calls and completely block my number? That toxic piece of trash, Qin Shu, materialized out of some random, filthy alleyway, his face twisted in a psychotic fury as he pointed a finger directly at Bai Ningbing's face, screaming vile profanities. But the moment his gaze registered my physical presence, standing there, his entire body froze completely solid for a microsecond. Immediately after, out in a blind rage, pointing his finger straight into Bai Ningbing's face while hurling vicious slurs. But the split second he realized I was also physically standing right there, his smug expression froze completely solid for a brief moment. Immediately after, he tried to force that desperately fake, sickeningly familiar look of intimacy back onto his face. What's the matter? Come here just to enjoy our little circus show, have you? Your precious wife willingly faked a dynamic muscle paralysis for 5 long years, just for me. She treated you like a complete, brainless fool. To toy with. I didn't even bother wasting a fraction of my breath on this pathetic, completely defeated loser. The devastating ghost artist and plagiarism scandal surrounding Qin Shu had already completely detonated across the country. Hit with massive financial penalties and a brutal public canceled engagement, he was now staring down a mountain of catastrophic breach of contract lawsuits, leaving him utterly, irrecoverably bankrupt. I merely nodded, with a cold, indifferent smile. But the absolute second I spun on my heel to walk away, right behind my back, Bai Ningbing suddenly went completely, violently psychotic, lunging directly at Qin Shu and landing a brutal, echoing slap straight across his jaw. The toxic duo instantly dissolved into a vicious, savage brawl right in the middle of the filthy ceramic debris, drawing a massive crowd of spectators who aggressively recorded everything on their phones. By the very next morning, the headlines detailing the mutual destruction of the industry's most fraudulent couple had aggressively rocketed straight to the front page of every major art publication. The sheer volume of toxic backlash from the entire internet practically buried the two of them alive. Meanwhile, safely within the high-end Capital District, I watched the ongoing circus unfold without a single, solitary shred of emotion in my chest. Boss, massive congratulations. That toxic bastard Qin Shu is officially being sued for massive financial fraud by multiple high-profile, collaborative art galleries he's looking at, doing a heavy bid behind bars for a few years. Seriously, this poetic justice you serve them is absolute gold. Xiao Wang handed me a fresh espresso, his face brimming with pure, unadulterated excitement. However, the erratic, distorted minds of unhinged degenerates can never be rationalized through normal human logic. So when a completely cornered, desperate Qin Shu suddenly ambushed me inside my private parking garage in the capital, I wasn't even remotely caught off guard. His eyes were bloodshot as he gripped a rusted, weaponized box cutter. But the exact microsecond he lunged forward to scream at me, my elite, lightning-fast reflexes kicked in, and I delivered a devastating, blinding slap that sent him crashing violently onto the concrete floor. This brutal strike is for the horrific chemical burns on my hands that I willingly endured to shield Bai Ningbing back then. Consider the debt officially settled. Before his pathetic frame could even scramble to its feet, I aggressively drove a heavy kick straight into his ribs. And this savage kick is for the 5 wasted years of my peak youth that you parasitic freaks robbed from me. Qin Shu lay completely flattened, his face horribly bruised and swollen against the cold pavement, letting out a pathetic, guttural groan of unmitigated malice. Like an absolute, psychotic madman, he hysterically shrieked, demanding to know why on earth I was permanently destined to stay a million steps ahead of him. Fang Yuan, whipping my head around, I spotted Lin Chu charging into the garage, flanked by a squad of heavy security guards. The exact second she verified I was entirely unharmed, her tightly knit brows finally relaxed. Mai bảo vệ vội vã chạy tới thấy tôi vẫn bình an vô sự đôi chân mày that had been heavily furrowed, finally smoothed out. To my utter shock, Bai Ningbing had also doggedly stalked me all the way to this exact spot, creeping out like a literal ghost. From the pitch-black shadows, her hollow, ominous gaze locked directly onto the two of us. Bai Ningbing, you absolutely toxic, wretched bitch. You completely annihilated my entire life. That garbage Qin Shu, still pinned to the ground, shrieked at the top of his lungs, desperately trying to project every ounce of his boiling fury onto her. Yet Bai Ningbing completely and utterly ignored his frantic, venomous curses, standing completely frozen like a statue as her eyes darted between me and Lin Chu. It's definitely because of you that Fang Yuan completely abandoned me, isn't it? He explicitly promised me that he would serve as my functional hands for the rest of our lives, and that absolutely nobody on earth would ever cherish me more than him. Bai Ningbing's voice was eerily hollow, leaking an obsession so unhinged. It made my skin crawl. Lin Chu let out a sharp, dismissive scoff, instantly stepping forward to physically shield my body and completely severing Bai Ningbing's filthy, lingering gaze. Instinctively, I took 2 sharp steps backward. At that exact split second, the defeated Qin Shu, who was still sprawled out across the concrete floor, suddenly initiated a desperate lunge. The rusted box cutter in his grip aimed straight for my jugular. Fang Yuan, my career is utterly ruined, so let's both crash and burn right here. That's the only way I'll ever quench my absolute hatred. In this life or death, razor-thin crisis, I suppressed the agonizing flare-up of an old injury hidden in my ribs, brutally crushing my fingers around his weaponized wrist. The elite security squad that Lin Shu had brought along instantly swarmed the area, violently pinning the unhinged lunatic Qin Shu back down onto the pavement. Amidst the chaotic, echoing sirens of the approaching authorities, a thoroughly defeated Qin Shu shut his eyes in utter helplessness as he was aggressively shoved into the back of a police cruiser. Seriously, these toxic, rotten romantic complications of yours are getting increasingly lethal by the day. Lin Zhu playfully looked at her temples, turning her head to glare at Bai Ningbing, who still stood there completely catatonic on the asphalt. That terrifying gaze coming from your ex-wife doesn't look like it belongs to a mentally stable human being whatsoever. You seriously need to watch your back. I locked eyes with the completely lifeless, mirror-like void staring back at me from Bai Ningbing's face, and a sudden, overwhelming wave of profound dread violently washed over my entire soul. For the next 2 continuous weeks following my return, my private design studio was bombarded daily with an endless influx of massive, anonymous courier boxes, and inside every single one of them were beautifully finished, handmade ceramic masterpieces. Đột nhiên trào dâng một linh cảm cực kỳ bất an suốt nửa tháng sau khi trở về phòng làm việc của tôi mỗi ngày đều nhận được vô số thùng bưu kiện lớn bên trong toàn là những sản phẩm low-grade ceramic pottery, their warped, grotesque shapes completely stained with dried, horrific blood splatters. The very thing I used to crave with my entire soul had now transformed into a sickening nightmare that only sent chills running straight down my spine. A dynamic, intensely delayed devotion is exactly like biting into an apple, only to realize, halfway through, that you've swallowed the other half of a maggot. It's utterly, purely, stomach-churning and revolting. On one bleak, storm-drenched evening, the exact millisecond I unlocked Studio Fang Yuan, I spotted Bai Ningbing standing right out in the torrential downpour. God knows how long she had been lurking there. Is it because my sculpting isn't flawless enough? Don't worry, Fang Yuan. I can fire an endless mountain of pottery just to give to you. Clutching a grotesque, misshapen lump of raw clay in her hands, she flashed a manic, unhinged smile and staggered toward me. I locked eyes with her, not even wasting a single breath to verbally lash out, and directly kicked the pathetic piece of clay straight out of her hands. The mold crashed into a filthy puddle, instantly dissolving and melting into a worthless heap of muddy sludge. Bai Ningbing, snap the hell out of it. We are officially divorced. You aren't heartbroken. You're just completely suffering from withdrawal because you no longer have a personal servant to carry your entire life and do your work for you. From this second onward, whatever catastrophic ruin your life turns into has absolutely zero relevance to me. No, that's not true. Bai Ningbing completely suffered a mental breakdown, wailing hysterically as she collapsed onto the freezing, puddle-choked asphalt, using her mud-caked, filthy hands to desperately claw at the hem of my trousers. Then, what on earth do you want me to do? What do I have to sacrifice for you to finally believe that I genuinely love you? Take every single piece of this toxic garbage and get the hell out of here. Stop harassing our boss, you pathological psycho fraud. How do you even have the audacity to beg for forgiveness? Xiao Wang sprinted out, gripping a heavy broom, aggressively sweeping the shattered porcelain debris off the pavement. He firmly pulled me back inside the building and locked the security doors dead shut. Outside, the tragic, agonized wails of Bai Ningbing blended into the roaring cadence of the rainstorm, echoing like the screech of a literal demon. I genuinely believed that this circus had finally hit its absolute end, but by the very next morning, Xiao Wang, his face completely drained of any color, burst into my private office clutching a digital tablet. Boss, oh my God, that absolute psychopath of an ex-wife is currently broadcasting a live stream. Right there on the glowing screen. Sao tiểu vương mặt cát không còn. Giọt máu cầm máy tính bảng lao vào. Văn phòng của tôi sếp. Ôi người đàn bà điên đó đang livestream. Rồi trên màn hình. The once elegant, pristine ceramic goddess was sitting directly in front of a high-speed pottery wheel spinning at maximum velocity, her hair completely disheveled and matted, and her eyes entirely overflowing with pure, unhinged madness. The livestream broadcast room had already exploded with tens of thousands of active viewers, while a relentless torrent of toxic, vulgar insults and derogatory comments aggressively flooded the live chat. I know for an absolute certainty that you're watching this right now. Fang Yuan. She stared straight into the camera lens, curling her lips into a deeply unsettling, grotesque smile. If I don't resort to this, you will permanently refuse to ever look at me again. Suddenly, she brandished a razor-sharp, steel ceramic carving knife, pressing the cold edge directly against her own frail, slender wrists. Fang Yuan, you used to cherish these hands of mine more than anything on earth. If I didn't fake being paralyzed, you would have abandoned me. So, if I officially transform myself into a genuine, mangled cripple with absolutely no functional hands, won't you find me utterly pitiful and sprint straight back to serve as my functional hands once again? She let out a manic laugh as she slowly, systematically pressed the razor-sharp edge deep into her flesh. Yes, in the beginning, you protected me with your life, so this time, you will absolutely do the exact same thing. The live chat inside the broadcast room instantly detonated into absolute chaos. Some viewers frantically screamed to call the authorities, while toxic trolls aggressively instigated and egged her on to do it immediately. There was even a massive wave of internet users swarming my public social media accounts, try to weaponize toxic morality to force me into submitting. I felt the veins in my temples throbbing violently. If this psychopath actually committed self-harm right in the middle of a massive public broadcast, I would be permanently shackled by the toxic chains of public opinion for the rest of my natural life. I slammed my foot on the gas, racing like a missile toward her run-down, filthy apartment. I brutally kicked her front door off its hinges. By Ningbing, what in the absolute hell are you trying to accomplish? The exact millisecond by Ningbing's eyes locked onto me, she let out a euphoric, ecstatic squeal, exactly like a toddler who had just been handed candy. The live stream had been abruptly disconnected at some unknown point. She hoisted the sharp carving knife high into the air, her gaze overflowing with frantic anticipation as she stared at me. Fang Yuan, what do you think of my magnificent proposal? Suppressing my roaring fury, I aggressively strode straight toward her, and without a single millisecond of hesitation, I reeled back my arm and delivered a devastating strike. Right across her jaw, the brutal slap echoed violently through the cramped apartment, sending the steel carving knife clattering loudly onto the floor. Do you honestly think that by weaponizing a pathetic low-life live stream to mutilate yourself, you can magically erase the disgusting reality that you maliciously defrauded me for 5 long years? Answer me by Ningbing. You and that pathetic piece of trash Chin Chu are truly cut from the exact same. Sao bạch ngưng băng cô và kẻ tồi tệ đó đúng là một vile cloth. Match made in absolute hell. Back then, I was simply utterly blind. I stared down at her with a gaze brimming with pure, unadulterated fury, leaving absolutely zero warmth or affection left in my eyes. Bai Ningbing clutched her burning crimson cheek, screeching hysterically like a stray cat whose tail had been viciously stepped on. She clamped onto my bare arm, screaming, "No, that piece of trash and I have absolutely zero connection anymore. We are the ones who are legally husband and wife. Please, I beg you, don't look at me with that horrific, freezing gaze right in the middle of our violent struggle." She abruptly snapped her head down, sinking her teeth brutally, and tearing in her own bare arm. causing fresh, crimson blood to instantly ooze from a wound. Bai Ningbing, have you lost your absolute mind? What in the actual hell are you trying to accomplish? She whipped her head up, her lips horribly stained with blood, her trembling eyes completely descending into a chaotic state of pure, unhinged psychosis. Yet she suddenly let out a manic, piercing cackle. As long as I actually become a dynamic cripple, Fang Yuan will absolutely sprint back to my side. What on earth was I supposed to do now? If this lunatic actually managed to mutilate herself right in front of my face, I could dive straight into the Yellow River and still never be able to scrub this toxic stain off my reputation. Fortunately, Lin Chu arrived, leading a tactical team of emergency medical technicians and psychiatric specialists who burst into the room, just in the nick of time, violently pinning down a manic Bai Ningbing before she could inflict any more severe self-harm. Watching Bai Ningbing being forcefully injected with a heavy dose of fast-acting sedatives and strapped tightly onto a medical transport stretcher, I slumped heavily against the doorframe, gasping for air as if my entire life force had been completely and utterly drained. If I hadn't been constantly monitoring her manic online behavior and alerted the emergency services well in advance, you would have been completely dragged straight down into the abyss by that lunatic. Today, Lin Chu furrowed her brows deeply, locking her gaze onto the raw, bleeding lacerations scoring across my arm, before her face relaxed into a soft smile of profound relief. But regardless, this toxic, ticking time bomb has finally been permanently dismantled. Bai Ningbing was officially diagnosed with severe, unhinged, paranoid schizophrenia, and her own parents forcefully committed her into a high-security, isolated psychiatric asylum. The suffocating, pitch-black cloud that had haunted my life had finally dissolved into pure clarity. I sank into the luxury leather sofa inside my private creative studio, the golden morning sunlight washing over my skin as I embraced a state of absolute, tranquil peace I hadn't felt in years. Hey, Mr. Workaholic, it's finally the weekend. Are you seriously going to block out the world and create art again? How about actually dedicating some quality time to your ultimate savior and guardian angel? Lin Chu sauntered in, gripping two freshly brewed cups of rich espresso, flashing me a deeply suggestive, playful smirk. Staring up at her radiant, flawless face, I suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to playfully tease her. You're acting incredibly attentive right now, but back when you leaked that explosive audio file to me years ago, you definitely didn't possess a single shred of this gentle charm. She elegantly set the coffee cups down on the table, wiping the playful smirk completely off her lips, as she glided directly toward my seating area. Leaning down entirely unprompted, she pressed a soft, lingering kiss straight against my cheek. To successfully conquer a stubbornly dense guy like you, whom I've secretly and deeply loved for literal decades, a girl's got to deploy a few calculations and tactical moves occasionally, don't you think? Otherwise, how could I ever justify the agonizing years I spent overseas, suffering in absolute silence out of pure jealousy? The intoxicating, velvety warmth blossoming against my skin caused my entire brain to completely short-circuit for a fraction of a second, and my heart rate involuntarily exploded into a frantic, pounding rhythm. I jerked back subtly as if I'd been violently struck by a high-voltage electric current, desperately attempting to mask the chaotic, fluttering embarrassment inside my chest. How on earth had I never realized in the past that this woman could be so aggressively forward and assertive, listening to her completely unrestrained, melodic giggles echoing through the room? I momentarily felt a wave of genuine embarrassment. I reached out my hand, intending to playfully pinch her cheek and demand she stop laughing at my expense. But Lin Chu only let out an even louder, more euphoric laugh. She didn't even bother dodging my fingers, willingly letting me indulge in our playful banter. Her crystal-clear, radiant laughter echoed throughout the entire studio, completely obliterating every single lingering shred of pitch-black trauma from the room. The grueling, agonizing monsoon season that had dominated my existence for 5 long years had officially evaporated into nothingness. Brilliant, Golden sunshine pierced directly through the scattered clouds. From this exact millisecond onward, every single day of my life was destined to be filled with vibrant, unadulterated, and breathtaking happiness. Have an incredible night, everyone. Đi trước u ám cuối cùng trong căn phòng mùa. Mưa kéo dài đằng đẵng cuối cùng đã dứt hẳn. Ánh nắng xuyên qua từng tầng mây kể từ nay về sau. Mỗi một ngày đều sẽ là những ngày tháng tươi, đẹp rực rỡ. Chúc cả nhà ngủ ngon.